Okay, Mum, I'll be heading to the bus stop for school now.
Alright then, Arnold. You better be on your best behavior while at school. Have a great day, and see you after school.
Goodbye.
Arnold doesn't realize it, but today, I will be his substitute teacher in his English class.
Why?
Because Mrs. Maitland called me yesterday that Mrs. Lauren is suffering from a common cold and won't come to school today, and she and Mrs. Maitland thought that I could take over her class today to see how Arnold behaves at school.
Interesting. Anyway, I'm going to head over to the bus stop as well. Goodbye.
Goodbye, Jonathan. Have a good day at school. I got to drive to school now.
I wonder where Mrs. Lauren is right now. Maybe she's not coming to school for some reason.
I've been asking myself that question too. Maybe we'll get a substitute teacher today. Mum, what are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be at work right now?
I'm your substitute teacher for today.
Wait, what? How the thing did you even become today's substitute teacher?
Mrs. Lauren is sick today because she's suffering from a common cold. Therefore, your principal and Mrs. Lauren thought that I could become today's substitute teacher to observe your behavior, along with Kayla's and Lee's. You three will have a meeting with your principal, vice principal and assistant principals at the end of class, as well as both of your parents to review your behavior. Class is about to begin soon.
This feels so embarrassing. Why did my mum have to become today's substitute teacher?
Good morning, class. My name is Mrs. Mayfield, and I will be your substitute teacher for today's English class, as Mrs. Lauren is sick due to a common cold. Since I don't know most of your names, I will be passing an attendance sheet which you should sign with your first and last names. Okay, class, Mrs. Lauren wants you to continue working on your presentations about the 50 United States. I booked an iPad trolley in advance, so you can get out an iPad now. Also, since this is a group assignment, get into your groups.
Up. Why do I have to work with you three boys?
Because Mrs. Lauren assigned you here, she can't trust you to work with Arnold and Orly.
Bruh. Why the hell do I have to work with you?
That's because Mrs. Lauren cannot trust you to work with Arnold and or Kaylee.
We got to continue with our presentations now. I don't want to waste any more time.
Oh my god. Why the fuck do I have to work with you guys? I want to work with Kaylee and Lee.
Mrs. Lauren can't trust you to work with them, so she assigned you here.
I want to work with Kaylee and Lee. 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 I want to work with Kaylee and Lee.
Arnold, stop it! You're disrupting the class. Also, there's no way that you'll work with Kaylee and Lee, since Mrs. Lauren can't trust you to work with any of them.
Bro, Arnold, stop throwing a tantrum. You won't be able to work with Kaylee and or Lee. And like Mick and your mother just said, Mrs. Lauren can't trust you to work with any of them.
Yeah. I really want to work with Arnold and Kaylee, that's all.
Agreed. I don't want to work with these stupid nutcrackers which I don't even like.
We want to work together.
We want to work together. We want to work together. We want to work together. We want to work together.
Yeah, I want to work with Kaylee and Lee. We want to work together. We want to work together.
Quiet, all of you. Arnold, Kaylee, Lee, Mrs. Lauren can't trust all of you to work together because of the trouble the three of you are causing together, so there's no way I'm letting you do that. Either you work with your assigned groups, or I can tell Mrs. Lauren on you guys and she can give you 3 and F for refusing to work in your assigned groups.
Fine, you entitled and deluded Karen.
Hey! Lee, don't call me an entitled and deluded Karen. Now continue with your presentation with your group.
Fine.
Lee, what are your plans for the weekend?
Well, I'm just going to play some Fortnite.
Cool, I'm going to have another date with my boyfriend, Arnold.
I'm not going to work on my presentation until I'm able to work with Kaylee and Arnold.
Arnold, you'll work with Mick, Liam and Geraint whether you like it or not. There's no way I'm going to let you work with Kaylee or Lee. Deal with it or get an F.
Okay, that's it.
Agreed, I've had enough as well. I'm going to give you a taste of your own medicine.
Fuck you, Mrs. Mayfield.
You better let me go home now or I will set my iPad on fire.
Don't you dare, and Lee, sit down right now. What are you doing? Lee Gabriel Smith, how dare you? How dare you slap me in the face like that? That behavior is absolutely unacceptable. If you ever slap me in the face like that again, then I'll call the police and then you can rot in jail and show remorse of the trouble you just did. Now get out of my classroom. Also, Kaylee, for cursing at me and saying the F word at me, and Arnold, for threatening to set your iPad on fire if I don't allow you to go home, I'm going to kick you two out of my classroom and send you to the conference room with Lee. I simply have enough of your nonsense. And by the way, I'm going to tell Mrs. Mevling, Mr. Winston, Mrs. Murray Powell and Mr. Mitchell everything you three did today.
Hello, Mrs. Mayfield. How did your class go?
To be honest, this class did not go that well, because Arnold, Kaylee and Lee kept begging me to work in a group together, but I said no, because Mrs. Lauren can't trust them to behave well inside their group. Therefore, Lee called me an entitled and deluded Karen and Kayla the F word. Also, Arnold threw a tantrum because he really wanted to work with Kaylee and Lee, and also threatened to set his iPad on fire if I don't let him go home. And finally, Lee slapped me in the face because he had enough of my nonsense. In addition, because Lee slapped me in the face, I therefore quit being their substitute teacher. I just had enough of all three of them.
Wow. Just wow. Arnold, Kaylee, and Lee, you should know better than to disrespect your substitute teacher, especially Arnold, because she is your mother.
On the other hand, Arnold, Kaylee and Lee always get referrals when they get in trouble or disrespect their teachers on a regular basis, and also have to sign behavior contracts if they get into trouble too many times, or get into an extreme amount of trouble, which are valid for the entire school year. So far, Arnold already got 20 referrals this school year, Kaylee got 16 referrals, and Lee got 12 of them. In fact, Arnold already had to serve out-of-school suspension for 8 school days until Christmas break for the amount of referrals so far this school year. Also, Arnold had to sign 2 behavior contracts this school year, and Kaylee had to sign a behavior contract so far as well. A behavior contract means that the affected student will receive at least 4 hours of after-school detention every time they get a referral.
Oh, and that gives me a great idea as well. Arnold, Kaylee, and Lee, for your behavior in my English class recently, I'm going to give you a referral to all of you. I'm sure that Mr. Mitchell will also make all 3 of you sign a behavior contract for your recent behavior in my English class.
That's right. I'm going to make all of you sign another behavior contract for your amount of trouble you did today. If you don't sign your behavior contracts, you will be given out of school suspension until you do. And just to remind you, Kaylee and Lee, if you receive 20 referrals this school year, you will be given out of school suspension for a minimum of 10 school days. Here are your behavior contracts.
Mrs. Mayfield, just to let you know, this isn't the first time Lee slapped a member of staff at school. He slapped me once on his first day here, and I also threatened to call the police on him if he slapped me one more time. Oh, and since he slapped you recently, I'm indeed going to call the police on him for assault and battery. I can't tolerate you using physical violence if you're enraged, and therefore I'm going to press charges against you. I'm also considering to send you to an anger management class.
No, please, don't call the cops on me, please. I'm very sorry for doing all of this. Please forgive me, I'm begging you. Please don't call the police on me.
Too bad. I'm calling the police whether you like it or not, because you already slapped me and Mrs. Mayfield in the face. So that's why I'm calling the cops on you. Hello, is this the police? This is Louisa Mavling, the principal of Goanimate City Public Schools. I would like to report a student, Lee Smith, for simple assault. Could you please come over to conference room number 1 once you guys come over? Thank you. Goodbye. The police has been called, and they're en route to the school now.
And look what you just did, Lee. Your principal just called the police on you for slapping Mrs. Mayfield. You will be grounded for a very long time once we return home.
Hello Mrs. Mavling, Mr. Winston, Mrs. Murray Powell and Mr. Mitchell. Mrs. Mavling called the police because someone named Lee Smith was slapping school staff in their face. Is this true?
Yes, that's right. And Lee is the boy with the yellow hoodie and black trousers.
Oh, I see. When did Lee slap Mrs. Mavling and Mrs. Mayfield?
First, he slapped Mrs. Mavling at his first day at this school, after he got pissed off when Mrs. Mavling punished him because of his behavior, and he recently slapped Mrs. Mayfield as well, who was his substitute teacher in English class today. We had to hire another substitute teacher to take over her class after Lee slapped her in the face.
Lee, do you realize that slapping someone in their face is considered simple assault, which is a level 2 misdemeanor and may result in you being sentenced to up to 6 months in jail and or a fine of up to $5,000. Here is your citation. You need to go to court on February 6th.
Now, let's talk about the punishments Arnold, Kayleigh, and Lee will receive. First, we'll start with Arnold. Mrs. Mayfield gave you a referral because you begged her to allow you to work with Kayleigh and Lee in a group. You three already know that Mrs. Lauren can't trust you to work in a group because of your trouble-making acts. Therefore, I'm going to give you 5 hours of after-school detention for getting another referral as part of your behavior contract you've just signed. That detention will be held next Tuesday. And for threatening her to set your iPad on fire, which is school property, if she doesn't allow her to go home, you will be given an additional 2 hours of after-school detention next Thursday. You should know better than to disrespect your own mother like that.
Let's go on with Kayleigh. Mrs. Mayfield also gave you a referral for begging her to work with Arnold, Kayleigh and Lee in a group even though Mrs. Lauren can't trust you to do that because of your trouble you're causing together, as well as calling Mrs. Mayfield the F word. I'm also going to give you 5 hours of after-school detention next Tuesday.
Finally, we'll go on with Lee. Just like Arnold and Kayleigh, Mrs. Mayfield also gave you a referral for begging her to work in a group with them. You also called her an entitled and deluded Karen, and slapped her in the face. For receiving another referral, I'll be giving you 5 hours of after-school detention, and for slapping her in the face, we have decided to recommend you to the school board for expulsion because of your criminal charges you're facing. We know that you were never recommended to the school board for expulsion once, but because of your criminal charges and penalties you're facing, that's what we've decided for your behavior you did today. This means that you will be attending a hearing at the school board discipline committee on February 20th, where it will be decided if you're expelled or not. Until then, you will be given out of school suspension until further notice. In case you should be getting expelled, it can be lifted 3 months after the start of your expulsion. Even if you should not be expelled, you will still be given out of school suspension for a minimum of 20 school days. Also, I'm going to give you 2 8-hour detentions on Friday and Saturday, which will be held online, since you won't be allowed to go to school in person. Even if you are suspended or expelled, you are still required by law to go to school. Since you won't be able to attend Goanimate City Public Schools, you will either have to enroll into another school, or get homeschooled. You have up to a week to decide if you want to enroll Lee into another school, or to homeschool him. I can send you opportunities for nearby alternative schools that you can transfer to in an email. If you don't attend your online detentions, then there will be no way for you to be no longer suspended or expelled from this school until you serve both of your detentions.
Are you serious right now? Lee, now you're facing the possibility of expulsion for slapping Mrs. Mayfield in the face. I wish you were never born in the first place. I just want to disown you.
Arnold, you will be in a lot of trouble when we return home.
Same for you, Kayleigh. You'll be in a lot of trouble when we return home.
Here are your detention slips and suspension papers. Now, if there is nothing else to discuss, then we can end this meeting now. Oh, and just to remind you, you'll be grounded by your parents once you return home. Arnold, Kayleigh, and Lee, go home with your parents now, and Lee, don't return until your expulsion or out of school suspension is over.
Let's go home right now, Kaylee. You will be grounded for a long time when we return home.
Arnold, you will be grounded, and your PS5 will be taken away once we return home. Let's go home right now.
Lee, let's go home right now. You will be grounded big time and receive a huge belt whooping when we return home.
Oh. Arnold, how dare you threaten me to burn your school iPad if I don't allow you to go home, and beg me to work with Kayla and Lee.
I didn't expect you to misbehave that much while your mother was your substitute teacher. Also, you threw a tantrum because you wanted to work with Kayla and Lee.
Don't you know that Mrs. Lauren can't trust you to work with them because of your past actions with them? You could have accepted the fact that you have to work with other students.
And look what you did, you got detention because of that. You should be glad that you didn't get suspended for these actions, but you still had to sign another behavior contract.
That's it. You are grounded until we see a change in your behavior, and while you are grounded, you will be eating nothing but lumpy potatoes for every meal including dessert. No electronics, no PS5, no TV, no hanging out with your friends, and you'll do all of the chores in the household. Go to your room now and reflect about your actions.
And if you don't stop crying like a motor car right now, I will be turning you into one and make you so rusty so that no one will ever buy you.
Kaylee, I can't believe you had the audacity to beg Mrs. Mayfield to work with Arnold and Lee, and call her the F word.
Mrs. Lauren cannot trust you to work with them because of your past actions. And calling her the F word is very disrespectful. You literally blew it up this time.
Also, you received another detention thanks to you, and you also had to sign another behavior contract. You should be glad that you didn't receive a suspension today.
That's it. You are grounded until we see a change in your behavior, and while you are grounded, you will be eating nothing but lumpy potatoes for every meal including dessert. There'll also be no electronics, no PS5, no hanging out with your friends, no TV, and you'll be doing all the chores in the house. Go to your room now and think about what you did.
Lee Gabriel Smith, are you kidding me right now? Words cannot describe how much you're in trouble right now.
We absolutely cannot believe that you slapped your substitute teacher in her face. We raised you better than this. You can't imagine how much you're in trouble right now. You're facing the possibility of expulsion, and now you're also going to be charged with simple assault, meaning that you may land in jail or receive a hefty fine. You are such a pathetic monster which has no life and causes trouble all the time. I wish you were never born in the first place. I could just disown you right away if you continue to cause that much trouble.
That's it. You are grounded until your expulsion or suspension at your school is over, and until you get out of jail or pay your fine, and while you're grounded, you will be eating nothing but lumpy potatoes for every meal including dessert. There will also be no electronics, no Xbox, no hanging out with your friends, no TV, and you'll be doing all the chores in the household. Go upstairs to your room right now and think about what you did.
Wow.